It's time for another Mailbag Friday in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can also catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Well, we have a good amount of questions to get to, not as usual as the number of questions that we have in the middle of the season when we get up to 30 plus and stuff like that. But we do have about 14 or 15 to get to. Again, if you're one of those newer listeners, you can always send the questions to YouTube, or you can reach out to my Twitter handle. You can make them public. Just respond to the tweet I put out every Thursday night, or you can just direct message me. My DMs are open, as they say, so you can send me that way if you don't want your question to be public or don't want your username to be mentioned in this podcast, because I do want to give you credit for the questions that you do send here. So question number one is going to come from Ed. If and when might the Royals add more free agents? Might they be short-term signings? And if so, who are you liking? I do believe they're going to be probably more active in free agency when it comes to a role player. Think Adam Frazier, Garrett Hampson type. And I do think they're going to be in on free agency when it comes to that swing starter. Now, the names that I think we've heard the most about and that make the most sense, you've probably heard me bring up Josh Rojas before of Seattle. I know for some fans out there, he's not your favorite pick, and maybe you're tired of me saying that name, but he's been one of the few that they've been linked to when it comes to a role player. This wouldn't really be a role player either, because it would be through trade, but Brett Beatty is another guy that fits that mold of what the Royals say they're looking for, which is a left-handed hitting third baseman. Why it's so specific, that I don't really know. But Josh Rojas is a free agent. I don't see them bringing back Adam Frazier on a one-year deal. I think they would like to upgrade. Their same thing goes for Garrett Hampson. But those super utility roles just are pretty limited out there. I just don't think there's a lot of intriguing options that make a ton of sense. You certainly want to upgrade your bench a little bit because of how often Matt Quatrero uses them. But there just aren't a ton of names that feel like perfect fits when it comes to that super utility role. Josh Rojas does make the most sense when you look at what they're describing for what they're looking for. But other than that, I think he would be the top of the list free agent acquisition for a role player that I can think of, at least right now. When it comes to a swing starter, there's a couple names that I think I like. Michael Lorenzen, we talked about yesterday. Spencer Turnbull's another name that I like. Ross Stripling is somebody that I think could fit that mold a little bit. You also could turn to, I'm trying to think of his name now off the top of my head, that was out there in free agency. I might think about it later on in the show. But those three right now, I do think would make a lot of sense as cheap one-year deal type guys. And your question was, are they going to be short-term signings? I do. I think if they are going to get multiple year deal guys, it'll be through trade, because they'll be taking on the extra years of control that player has. So if they are going to be signing anybody, whether it be bullpen, rotation, role player, I think they would be one-year deals. But good question there coming from Ed. Prepsley asked, have you taken a look at the Royals prospects in AAA using StatCast provided by TJ Stats? If not, I could send some for you to use. Well, I apologize, Prepsley. I did not see this question. prior to doing this episode. That's the way I like to do on Mailbag Friday is I don't look at the questions beforehand. So I actually have not looked at the StatCast stuff. So if you are watching this in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, feel free to send it over to me. I would love to see what you found because I haven't used it just yet. I love it though, because it gives you better measurement on some of your prospects out there, because I'm done looking at just the basic numbers, what we always have had though, when it comes to minor league players. I want to know some of those advanced data numbers that tell us if a major league player is sneaky good or flying under the radar. And I think for the Royals, prospect system, we need that now more than ever because they don't have a top farm system, and you want to be able to find some of those diamonds in the rough a little bit. So yes, Prepsley, you can absolutely send it over to me. I would love to take a look at it. Steven's question is, do the Royals make a move for an outfielder or try and fill third base and use Garcia as a utility player? It really comes down to what they view this middle of the order bat as. Do they view that middle of the order bat as a third baseman? Do they view that middle of the order bat as an outfielder or a guy that plays multiple positions? That is still unknown at this point in time. We've heard some of the names they've been interested in, they've been linked to, but nothing has really transpired since the beginning of December. That will probably heat up a little bit more in January, but I would be curious to know what position they're really looking for. And I think at the end of the day, it would be an outfielder, because I have a hard time believing that they're going to run back the same three in the outfield of Melendez, Isbell, and Renfroe, not after, or especially after, saying that they wanted to upgrade this lineup, add a middle of the order bat, an impact bat, and then run back the three same outfielders that didn't provide you much offensively. So I do think it would be an outfielder. Maikel Garcia is interesting because, as I mentioned, they're looking for a left-handed hitting third baseman. Does that mean they want to platoon Maikel Garcia and this left-handed hitting third baseman? Does that mean they want to move him to another position? I mean, he played a little bit of second base. I think Maikel Garcia could shine in that role player look. I think that he could be maybe your best option instead of going after a Josh Rojas too. I mean, he plays third base, he plays shortstop, he plays second base. He even had a brief moment in the outfield this past year. Maybe he could be that Adam Frazier, Garrett Hampson type role, and he's the best base stealer on your team. So there is a lot of value there, which is why I think it's fine to hang on to him. And I think he could shine a little bit more in maybe an every other day role than being an everyday player. I know that wouldn't be too exciting to him because he wants to be an everyday player. But with Matt Quattro's lineup, if you can play a lot of positions, you're going to be in the lineup nearly every day. Maybe not the same amount as Whit Merrifield, Bobby Witt Jr. is, as Vinny Pasquantino is, as Salvador Perez is, as Kyle Isbell was. But I think you could still get in, 120, 125 games, even if you weren't that quote-unquote everyday player. But I do think that if they are to add another bat, which I do think they will, it'll be a guy that can play the outfield. But good question there coming from Steven. Mark's question is, what's the latest on the new stadium? What do you think will be the eventual resolution? Not much on the new stadium. I think that we certainly will get word if there is any movement on that. But what I can tell you is they're taking a much different approach this time around. I think in the first go around, there, of course, were a lot of changes, a lot of last minute changes, a lot of pushback. And they were very public about everything. When they put out something, it was very well known. When there were discussions happening, it was very well known. And that can be seen as a good thing because you're keeping the public in the loop. But at the same time, it also airs out everything where all of your mistakes, all of your mishandlings are out there to the public. And I think this go around, they're handling it a bit better. They're going more behind the scenes. They're more private discussions. That way they can have the best possible plan when it comes time to vote again on it. And I will say this, that I don't think my opinion's really changed on what's going to happen. I mean, Kauffman Stadium, where it is now, is not going to be a site that's playing baseball after the lease is up. But they will have a new stadium. It's just a matter of where. And I think since John Sherman has always said he wants downtown baseball, I've never thought that it makes sense to move them somewhere where it's not downtown. Because if that's the case, you might as well just spend all the money to do a renovation at Kauffman Stadium if you were going to just move it somewhere else where there's not a lot of busyness to it, where you can have a lot of extra revenue, where there's restaurants and bars and bar districts and things to do. So I do believe that there will be a new stadium. My gut tells me it will be downtown. I just really don't know where that stadium will be, because there's been so many different renderings. I'm sick and tired of seeing renderings. Like, if they pick a site and that's the one and it gets passed, then I can start focusing on it. But right now we've had 48 different sites that were picked, and none of them have come out to be true. So yeah, renderings look cool, but until a vote actually gets approved and the city's all right with it, then I don't think there's really anything to get too excited about. But to me, I do think that there will be downtown baseball in the future, not in the near future. It still will be, 5, 6, maybe 7 years away. But yeah, I do think that's where the direction will be headed, but they will have to have a much better plan in the next go around. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we got more questions to get to next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor and our title sponsor today in FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. You can love on betting which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It is absolutely thrilling. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. And for my pick, I am once again going to be going back to the NFL ranks. You heard my Bills and Jets pick last week, or actually yesterday, excuse me. I'm going to go to the Cardinals and Rams game and take the over on total yards for Kyren Williams. Let's get to our next set of questions here as soon as I can stop my timer here that I use for my sponsor reads. The next one here comes from Beans. Does Nelson Velasquez have a future with the Royals? It's a good question because we forgot a lot about Nelly Nukes once he got demoted to Omaha, and I don't think he did enough in AAA Omaha to make you think that, he's too good to be playing in AAA, that he's, overpowering AAA pitching. And I think that's, something that you have to take into account when it comes to guys that, really burst onto the scene. And when he got to Kansas City, he certainly flashed some potential. He flashed some big-time power. And, hey, maybe what Prepsley says with the StatCast data for minor league players, that could help us out a little bit more with Nelson Velasquez. But he's also got a good track record, or not a good track record, I would say a bigger sample size at the big league level that we can use, where maybe we don't need to use the AAA data. But Nelson Velasquez does have a lot of glaring holes to his game. Number one, he's not a good fielder. And that's something the Royals really value, especially when it comes to outfielders. I know that you'll say, well, MJ Melendez isn't a great defender. He's also grown a lot in the last 2 years. I mean, he was a catcher, then he was a right fielder, then he was a left fielder. But, they value Kyle Isbell out there in center field. Hunter Renfroe's not the greatest of defenders, but that historically the Royals have really valued defense. And when you're a guy like Nelson Velasquez, who hasn't been a big leaguer for a really long time, like Hunter Renfroe has, or now like Kyle Isbell has, I wouldn't say a really long time, but long enough, that you have to be able to shine somewhere, right? If you are still finding your footing at the big league level, you have to shine somewhere. And I thought for a little bit of time it was the power. But remember, he went through a big time slump where the power wasn't there anymore. And that is something that I think would concern me when looking at his future for the Royals. If he was somebody that, could give you 20 home runs on a 162 game season, I think that's fine as a bench bat. And maybe he comes into spring training and he wins one of those jobs. I mean, going into last year, he was seen as a starter, and he had that spot for a little bit of time. I thought he was fine to start the year, and then he went ice cold, and the Royals had to make a decision to demote him, and that was that for him. He'll have another opportunity. He's still young, and I think the power is still there, but he's got to round out his game a little bit more. There's way, way too much swing and miss. And if you're going to have a lot of swing and miss, I'd like to see a better walk rate. And if you're going to have those two things, I got to see tremendous power. And that was something that lacked a little bit when he had that big time slump in 2024. So right now, I view him as a 4A player. I could see him going up to Kansas City periodically throughout the season, but I don't think that he is a future starter in 2025 unless somebody were to go down with an injury. This one, it comes from Aiden. What's a surprise trade candidate the Royals might go after that's not really being talked about? Well, it's so tough to, I think I've said this before, it's so tough to, define or identify a surprise trade candidate because you don't really know who's available right now. We've heard some of the teams that are shopping guys. I think one name that I would really love to see, I'd imagine the asking price is pretty high, but I think one of Jeff Passan's articles had highlighted Jake Cronenworth as a trade candidate. And he is somebody who, as we mentioned with Josh Rojas, plays multiple positions. He had somewhat of a down year last year. I mean, he really, broke onto the scene with the Padres as a rookie and was great in the early years of his career, and then had kind of a step back in the final 2 years here. But now that he's available and the Padres are constantly trying to upgrade pieces in their lineup, maybe you could strike a deal like that. I mean, he's a left-handed bat. He can play third base. He plays multiple positions. Maybe the Royals are interested in somebody like Jake Cronenworth because I think that would make a lot of sense. But that would be one that would really surprise me. I'm just going off some of those guys that are seen as available. I don't see them making a play for somebody like Luis Robert, not somebody in the division. I think the White Sox would deal Robert to Kansas City, and I don't think Robert would be that great of a fit for the Royals. Another guy that I wouldn't say is a surprise fit, though, since he is limited position-wise, Lamont Wade Jr., I would love to see in a Royals uniform. I think he could be that middle-of-the-order bat, a tremendous walk rate like Jonathan India has. I would hope they're still trying to make calls about him, even though he's a first baseman and DH. I think that he would really play nicely in the Royals lineup, but I wouldn't say that would be a major surprise. I think somebody like Jake Cronenworth would be a big-time surprise if the Royals were to go after him. Sam's question is, looking at Alex Verdugo's numbers, even from a down year, I think he'd fit so well for us. Realistically, would the Royals even consider a 2 to 3 year contract with mutual options? He'd check the middle of the lineup bat and corner outfield boxes for a reasonable price. Not a bad question. I don't think Alex Verdugo's numbers were as bad as Yankees fans made it seem. I don't think he was a great player. And I think where I'm at when it comes to Verdugo is the Royals do need a true impact bat, somebody that can move the needle at the middle of the order. And I'm not sold that Alex Verdugo is that guy. I think if he was somebody to be brought in to be your bottom of the order hitter, if he was somebody to replace MJ Melendez, then all right, I could hear you out on it. But to be that one last bat they're trying to acquire, I think I would go after somebody else. And I don't think I would be too high on the idea of Alex Verdugo coming in on a 2 to 3 year deal. Don't hate the question, because I do see a lot of people out there bring up Verdugo and say, the numbers aren't awful. Yankees fans just made him seem like he was terrible, but it really was because their lineup was so loaded. And when you didn't play that well, you stuck out like a sore thumb. But to me, I think if they're going to have one bat left to add, I would want somebody that's a little bit better than Alex Verdugo. This one comes from Sports. I know they won't, but could the Royals get 3 top 30 prospects for Cole Reagans? What would you expect his value is? Baltimore's a ton of minor league talent and need pitching. I don't see there's, as you brought up, it's not going to happen. I mean, his value would be tremendously high. And if the Royals were to list it on any offers, it would have to be way more than 3 top 30 prospects. And I'm assuming you're meaning within an organization. I don't think the Royals would trade Cole Reagans for anything less than maybe 3 or maybe even 4 top 60, top 70 prospects in all of baseball. But again, the Royals aren't in a position where they need to be trading away the ace of the rotation when he's got years of control. He's coming off the best year of his career, an all-star season. If the Royals were 68 and what would that be? 68 and 94 last year, then okay, maybe you do try to move him. But the Royals are coming off an ALDS appearance. There's no need to look to trade Cole Reagans right now. If you bottom out this year and you have a terrible season and Cole Reagans regresses a little bit, then maybe you do try to start fielding some offers. But I believe they view him as a cornerstone piece now for the next few years. And I know you asked about value. They would be asking for the moon. And I think if they were to deal him, they're not asking for prospects. They're asking for guys with years of control, young, great big leaguers. And I think J.J. Picollo and company know what type of value he has and wouldn't sell him for anything less than the top value, the peak value of what Cole Reagans would be worth there. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll wrap it up with our final questions on a Mailbag Friday. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15, or you can find us on wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Our last sponsor we want to give a shout out to is Gametime. I know Christmas has just wrapped up, and maybe you took my word and gave somebody a gift through tickets, and hopefully you bought those tickets over at Gametime. One of my tickets was actually tickets to the Royals and Giants game in San Francisco. I'll actually be out there next year going to that game with my brother. Got him that as a gift, and you guessed it, I got those tickets over at Gametime. They're already in my inventory. It was great to see all the possible prices out there, the hottest deals. And after I bought that, they're sending me other notifications about other things I may like. But if you did go out there and buy tickets for somebody through Gametime, let us know in the comments. Let me know, just so we can talk about how great Gametime is when you go out there to buy tickets for whatever it may be. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is game time. Our last set of questions will begin with Tommy here. Tom's question is, hindsight is 2020, but am I wrong for thinking Gleyber Torres at $15 million and keeping Singer would have been better for 2025 than the Singer India swap? I'm going to say no on that. Or at least I think that was the right way to answer that. Sorry, I'm going to say you are wrong. No. So here's why I think Jonathan India is a better option here. Brady Singer gave good value to the Royals in the rotation, right? Brady Singer also really, really struggled in the second half of the season. And that was something that I believe the Royals took into account when shopping him this offseason, where some of the numbers he had overall, I think, was due to a little bit of good luck. He had a really good defense. He was pitching in a pitcher's ballpark. And now with him going to Cincinnati, that's going to be a huge learning curve for him, because Great American Ballpark is a trampoline. I mean, the ball is going to fly out of the ballpark. And if Brady Singer's not careful, I mean, a lot of those hanging pitches that he had, it's not going to be those deep flyouts at Kauffman Stadium. They're going to be, 20, 25 rows up at Great American Ballpark. But the Royals were going after somebody that they knew could help the leadoff spot. And Jonathan India does that. Jonathan India had a top 5 walk rate in all of baseball. That's something the Royals haven't had in I don't know how long. They have never really valued guys with high walk rate. Even their best hitter, their best player in Bobby Witt Jr. is not somebody that walks a lot. He doesn't really need to, and I'm not going to be too worried if his walk rate hangs around 7-8% his entire career, because he's an MVP candidate and he's going to win an MVP at some point. I don't think that Jonathan India is head and shoulders above Gleyber Torres. I think he's a slight upgrade over Gleyber Torres. And I've said this before, I think Chris Bubich can be an upgrade over Brady Singer. So you trade Brady Singer, you take on Jonathan India with an extra year of control. He upgrades your leadoff position because, that 356 OBP is something you can't take lightly. Gleyber Torres had 330 in 2024, was somebody that, looked great in the postseason. And I think that's why he got the $15 million from the Tigers, because he really surged come playoff time, especially against the Royals. But I do think that Jonathan India long-term is going to be a better solution for the Royals than Gleyber Torres was. And I do think Brady Singer was due for regression in 2025, which is why I wasn't too upset when they dealt him 1-for-1, actually 1-for-2, because they got Joey Wiemer in that deal. But I don't hate the question. I understand why some fans who are really tied to Brady Singer would say, man, we should have just hung on to him and gotten Gleyber Torres for $15 million. But I do think Jonathan India is going to be a better player for the Royals than Gleyber Torres was going to be for Kansas City. And maybe we can just look at how these two guys go about it in 2025. How would Jonathan India do in Kansas City? How will Gleyber Torres do for Detroit? Next question is going to be coming from Blaze. Who do you think are the most likely acquisitions for the middle of the order bat, swing starter, and third baseman? Also, do you think the Royals will invest in a setup guy to replace Bubitz's production? I'm going to go no on the setup guy. I think they really like Hunter Harvey. If they are going to add somebody to the bullpen, I'd imagine it'll be a cheaper one-year deal, somebody that is hanging around in February and just gives some more competition come spring training. For the third baseman, I think right now I'll go Josh Rojas, super utility guy, to be the role player. For the swing starter, I want to say Michael Lorenzen. I really do. I don't know if the Royals are going to give him that two-way look. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. Maybe Michael Lorenzen will be fine just pitching if the Royals give him enough money. But I'll go Michael Lorenzen for now. Then the middle of the order bat, I'm so torn between Taylor Ward and who was the other guy I was thinking about? That's twice now in this episode that I've forgotten my train of thought. So for that reason, I think I'll go Taylor Ward still. I think they have to be interested there. Oh, the other name I think I'll go with here is maybe a Mike Yastrzemski or Lamont Wade Jr. I think those would be two guys that the Royals could afford. You look at the numbers actually for Mike Yastrzemski, they haven't been that bad, and he'd be a corner outfield guy. I think it would make a little bit of sense. I know it's not going to be a popular take, but I do think he could fit that middle of the order look, and I think he'd be affordable. So those are kind of three names that I'm looking for that middle of the order bat. Next one here comes from RB Carr. Thoughts on Gleyber Torres? Oh, this actually came 6 hours ago. So unfortunately, RB Carr, your question is about Gleyber Torres. If the Royals should look at him, I can't anymore because he signed a 1-year, $15 million deal with the Detroit Tigers. So Kansas City is going to have to play against him more than just a few times in 2025. Jason's question is Taylor Ward worth the prospects we'd be forced to give up? Well, it depends. I mean, we haven't really heard what prospects the Angels would be asking for. If they are asking for anybody inside the top 5, I would say anybody that is not Jack Caglione, Blake Mitchell, Carter Jensen, and Blake Walters to me, and maybe Ben Cooter. I'll throw Ben Cooter in there. I think everybody else to me would be on the table, to be honest with you. I think those 5 to me, I would not be okay giving up. But if it was just one of them, I think I would like to hang on to Blake Mitchell, Carter Jensen, and Jack Caglione. And then I would roll the dice with the 2 pitchers there that, maybe they do have success at the big league level, but it doesn't bite you in the ass years later. But I do think if it's just one of those guys and not the 3 I just mentioned there, I think it would be worth bringing in somebody like Taylor Ward for the middle of the lineup. And lastly, Jeff asks, when do you think we'll hear about the Royals making a signing or a trade? Before or after mid-January? Hope you're feeling better. I am certainly feeling better. When will they announce a move? I'll probably say, it can happen any day. It could happen today for all I know. That's kind of the obscure part about the offseason. But I will say that anywhere from maybe not the first part of January, but getting closer to January 8th, 9th, and 10th to January 20th, I think in that wheelhouse, some move will likely happen. I don't know, though. I'm throwing a dart at the dartboard here because we really haven't heard anything. There hasn't been any sort of movement. The market's been heating up a little bit. Who knows? Maybe the Royals make a move a lot sooner than that. All right, it's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB as baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we are going to be bringing you another episode be talking a little bit more about this market and with it heating up, should the Royals be making a move now? But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.